Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Breaking the Mold Volume 2, presented by the Tackle Talk podcast. This four-part series is dedicated to 4 tackle companies who are pushing the envelope of bait design and bringing unique, innovative designs to market. On today's episode, we are joined by founder and owner of BAITS, Flint Pierce. Episode 1 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2 starts right now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a very special episode of the Tackle Talk podcast as we get ready to kick off our 4-part series, which we will do in just a second. But first, the Tackle Talk podcast is presented by American Legacy Fishing. And we got some big news from ALF in addition to stocking your favorite rods, reels, line, baits, apparel. American Legacy Fishing now offers installation services. Yes, if you have a boat anywhere near Indiana, the guys at American Legacy Fishing can now rig your boat out for you. That means power pole installation, installing your graphs and stack mounts and transducers, lithium batteries, chargers, sea deck padding, even boat cleaning and detailing. The guys at ALF also told me that they're currently taking trade-ins on select trolling motors and electronics if you have some of those laying around that are not being used. Add all of that to the long list of benefits you already know about ALF, like their price match guarantee, the internet's best selection of gently used fishing gear, the easiest trade-in program for your old gear on the planet, and now fully rigging out your boat and accessories, and you've got, in my humble opinion, the best tackle shop in the country, all family-owned and operated right here in the Midwest. And more big news, we have a brand new Tackle Talk code for American Legacy Fishing from here on out, which is going to be Tackle Talk 5. Now, that code is going to get you 5% off, but here's the big part. Unlike our last code, this code is stackable. So we heard a lot of you talk to us and say, hey, ALF runs so many sales that it's hard to use the coupon code because so many of the things on the website are not regularly priced because they run too many sales. Well, now this code is stackable on top of sale items, which gives you even bigger savings. In my opinion, it's a better option because now you can use it on regularly priced and sale items. Again, that code is Tackle Talk 5, so be sure to use that from here on out. Code Tackle Talk 5 at checkout to save you even more on both regularly priced and sale items over at AmericanLegacyFishing.com. All right, folks, we have arrived at episode 1 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2. Now, you'll probably remember, Volume 1 of Breaking the Mold was released in April of 2022, and it featured Steve Big O Parks, the man behind the Rage Tail line of soft plastics, Derek Carr, the owner and founder of Beast Coast Fishing and their innovative jig designs, Mark Sexton, one of the key individuals behind Berkley's Max Scent formula, and Ott Defo, the lead designer of Rapala's OG series of crankbaits. So if you haven't listened to Volume 1, I highly suggest you do it because those are 4 great conversations about some of the most innovative products on the market. And this year, to kick off 2025, we're releasing Breaking the Mold Volume 2 with 4 brand new episodes. And today, we kick it off with a very cool, small American tackle company that I personally have been very impressed with over the past year or so, after one of my friends gave me one of their spinnerbaits to try, and they've been a staple in my tackle box ever since, and it's BAITS. So today, we are joined by the founder and owner of BAITS, Flint Pierce, to learn more about what makes this company so special, what makes him tick, and what makes his baits, and in particular one very special bait, so unique. And this is one of those up-and-coming companies that I'm personally so excited about, and you get one look at his products, and it's tough not to be blown away by his quality quality and his attention to detail. And it blows my mind that one of the companies that's making what I think is truly the most unique and high quality spinnerbaits in the country is a small company out of Missouri that's run and operated by one guy. So you heard that right. Flint is a one-man show. He designs the baits and he personally builds each bait one by one. And before we dive into the conversation with Flint today, you guys know that in addition to spotlighting some of the best unique tackle in the country, another one of our core missions here at Tackle Talk is to save you money. And we're also going to do that today because if you listen to this show and you want to give these baits a try, especially the bait that we're going to spend a lot of time discussing today with Flint, no spoilers here, but it's an insanely cool bait that I haven't left home without in the past year or so. Flint was kind enough to offer all the Tackle Talk listeners an exclusive coupon code just for this Breaking the Mold series. So that means that you can go over to battlebaits.com and you can use code TACKLETALK10 to save 10% off your entire purchase starting today. And it goes without saying, but as always, here at Tackle Talk, we don't make a dime off of this, right? This is simply to help you, the listener, try out and experience some of the coolest tackle on the planet and save money doing it. So you're getting a killer product from a great guy and a great small American company that you can feel proud about supporting, all while picking up what I think might be one of my favorite baits of the year, which you're about to hear about in this episode. So again, that's code TACKLETALK10 is going to save you 10% on your entire purchase over at battlebaits.com if you want to try these baits out after listening to the episode. And with that, we're not going to keep you waiting any longer. Let's begin episode 1 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2 with BattleBaits founder and owner Flint Pierce. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today, we are joined by owner and founder of BattleBaits, Flint Pierce. Flint, thank you so much for stopping by the show today. We really appreciate it.
Man, I can't tell you how excited I am to be here, and it's an honor. Thank you. Looking forward to this for a long time.
Well, so have I. I've looked forward to the chance to talk to you because I have kind of grown fond of one of your baits in particular, but a couple. So this is going to be a fun conversation and a bait that I've put quite a bit of work in, and I think a lot of people are going to be really excited to obviously hear kind of the backstory behind it. But for starters, like this whole 4-part series is really about 4 companies that I really truly think are breaking the mold, standing out, being very unique with their products and development, and just some people that need a little bit more shine too and a little bit more backstory on what it is that you're doing and what makes it so special. So the first thing I want to start off, I want to tip my hat to you on the brand itself. Not even the baits, just the brand, because in the fishing industry, we are so bad at branding. Like it's very much like a 70-year-old dude's industry where just everything is old, everything's corny, everything's cheesy. And you have this really nice, like fully encompassing brand where everything is on brand. Like if something's not naked, it's commando. You know, something is not finesse, it's suppressor, right? Like that kind of stuff. Everything is under this sort of battle, you know, masculine gun type feel to it. And you've done a really good job just from the brand side of things. Where did the brand BattleBaits start?
Well, so I was actually a police officer for 13 years before taking BattleBaits on full time. Okay. So a lot of that, it gets misconstrued that I was a veteran, but I'm not. I was a police officer. I was a SWAT team operator. Towards the end of my law enforcement career prior to taking this on full time. So I think I probably drew a lot of the names and the influence from some of my buddies on the police force, but my brother's in the military, and I think a lot of it stemmed from that probably.
That makes sense. Because, I mean, there's other things, too, like your spin heads are helo heads, right? Like all of that kind of stuff. Brush bombs are your brush jigs. Like the whole thing is so well done that, again, it's something that in fishing we don't do very well. So hats off to you just on the brand itself. But the very important part is obviously the baits. So the background on that, I think I read somewhere that you started off in Oregon, and I think you also started out a little bit on the fly fishing side. Help me in my brain make that connection. The brand that you have does not strike me as like West Coast sort of hippy dippy a little bit out there, right? That kind of stuff. When did you see the light and did you start to make your way toward like the bass fishing side of things?
I'll tell you, I was kind of forced into it, which is, I'm going to do my best to be a fast talker. My wife says I carry things out a lot more than I should. So
that's what we're here for. We're good.
I grew up in a very small town, actually 400 people. and right on the Smith River, which is the furthest wild and scenic river in California prior to the border of Oregon. And we were really close to the coast as well. So I grew up salmon, steelhead fishing, trout fishing, and a lot of kind of our bigger game was on the ocean. So a lot of lingcod, a lot of snapper. And I was fortunate. My dad, my brothers loved to fish, but there was no bass fishing at all. There was none of it was even existent in that area. And when I was about probably 10 or 11 years old, I first kind of got exposed to the lure building side. I got a do-it mold. My brother and I started pouring jigs to go out and ocean fish with, and we were spray painting them in the backyard up against the fence and hammering them with a claw hammer with dimples on the face, trying to create scale patterns, and we would go out and catch fish with them. And it was just such a different feeling, being able to produce something to go out and catch fish with them from a really young age. And kind of fast forward as years went on, I really got into fly fishing, had the opportunity to move up to Alaska, started guiding salmon and steelhead trips and halibut trips. And the areas that I was fishing, I was really kind of just inundated. It was almost like driving in LA traffic. The Kenai River, Homer, Alaska, a lot of fishing pressure. So on my days off, I really got into hiking to exclusive areas and fly fishing, and really kind of like it embodied the whole match the hatch. And so I loved creating stuff that I could go out and kind of get in nature and feel like I was getting some sort of tactical advantage of my area by matching the hatch. And I got married in 2008, moved from Alaska to Las Vegas, took all my fly tying stuff, moved to Las Vegas. I was plopped down with the only water around was Lake Mead. And I tried to fly fish when I first got there, realized it was a super deep canyon reservoir with tons of wind, and that wasn't going to happen. And I have some really amazing cousins that are really big into the bass industry, and they're here in Branson, Missouri. We had an opportunity to come out here on a vacation. I fished Table Rock for the first time, and I had an opportunity to fish in a small club tournament, but it was like this competition again. And I grew up in sports and basketball and football, and it was like, the early morning takeoff was essentially like running out of the tunnel. And it was this, I thought that point of my life was done. And I just absolutely fell in love with the competition side of bass fishing and being able to compete and do something. So I went back to Las Vegas, and I was just bound and determined to figure out Lake Mead and figure out how to catch bass all of a sudden. And so I joined a club as a co-angler and kind of just worked my way through. I got to get jigs, I got to get spinner baits, and it was just run-of-the-mill stuff that I could get at any tackle shop. And the cool part about Las Vegas for me was going out and fishing the heat that you were under, and the super, super clear water the heat would melt all your skirting material on your jigs or your spinner baits or buzz baits or anything else. And I was freshly married and didn't have a great paying job at the time. So I wanted to fix my baits, and I had all of my fly tying stuff from Alaska, and I started tying jigs back together, just kind of to repurpose them and save money. And when you're constructing with kind of a fly tying mentality, you have the ability to kind of layer skirting material a little bit different, and it kind of snowballed from there. I mean, I started fishing as a co-angler and meeting these people, and they would see the jigs I was throwing or the spinner baits, and where did you get that? How did you come up with that color? I was like, well, it was kind of just a mishmash of all these other baits that had fallen apart. And I thought it really looked like this bait fish or this type of crawdad that I saw. And then the guys in the club started saying, "Hey, let's buy you some molds, let's buy you some paint, and can you build us some baits?" So it was by accident, kind of by necessity, but that's been one thing. Like, I guess the fly tying side has really played such a huge role in how the business has progressed forward, because the construction method really just allows you to create some stuff that is outside of the box and outside of the norm.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there for sure. So the first thing is, like, it makes a lot of sense, and we'll get to a lot of this when we dissect one of these baits in a little bit, but the way that you assemble the skirt, now it makes a whole lot of sense that it is a fly tying background. Again, I'm not going to give too much away because I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, but at what point did this become the job? Like, you're out there, you're, fishing Lake Mead, people are asking around like, hey, let's chip in, let's help you get some molds, we'll start buying some stuff from you. At what point do you realize, like, oh, this is not just like a thing I'm doing for fun on the side anymore. This is now like potential career path.
It took a long time. And ultimately that's kind of where the business began to form, because I was tying baits for people, but I was also learning how to bass fish, and the availability of products that were out there. You would commonly have frustrations with the designs or the functionality. I would like this aspect of a certain bait, not necessarily like this other aspect, the weed guard positioning of the hook keeper, what hook was being utilized. So it kind of put you in a box to where it's like, man, I'm creating these baits, but I'm limited to what I can do based on my available heads or designs. And it took a long time. We ended up moving back up to Oregon, and I transferred police agencies out of Las Vegas to an agency in Oregon. We lived there for about 10 years, and I really didn't think that, as the business was moving forward very fast, a lot faster than I can control. I also went from having no kids to 3 kids in 18 months. I had twins and my oldest. And so it kind of became a thing where I didn't think that financially we could ever take it on. And, but I was so incredibly passionate about it. And it was one of those things that, when you're working a job and the hours are driving on and they're not moving fast enough. But when you're in the shop and you're passionate about what you're doing and you're putting so much love and energy and time into it, the hours just flew by. So we spent a lot of time praying about it, and a lot of time kind of just trying to make the things align to where if given the opportunity, we'd take it on full time. And ultimately that door was opened in 2020. So I was able to take it on full time, and the rest has kind of just been a grind history since.
So is this like a COVID necessity business? Like, was that what happened in 2020? Like, that's the boat that I was in. Your job changes a lot during COVID or the whole 2020. Like, was that a catalyst for you?
As strange as it was, it really wasn't. I think a little bit of divine intervention in the whole thing, but we were trying to take my twins for their 6th birthday to Disneyland. And Disney was shut down as a result of COVID, but we'd saved and we'd planned and told them that we were doing this big vacation for them. And we were trying to wait for the kids to get old enough to have a memorable vacation. And I have a ton of family out here in Branson that's on Table Rock. So we came out here and spent a week out here instead of going to Disneyland. And, kind of just experiencing it and being out here and I don't want to say anything bad about, we loved where we lived, but this was a different part of America for us, and opportunities for the family and moving forward and their ages and schooling. So we thought, you know what, we're going to take the leap. And ultimately I kind of thought that I was going to transfer and go into law enforcement out here, but it was an opportunity at that point in time. It was, there wasn't a significantly long line for law enforcement officers. So I thought I could take this opportunity, take the business on full time, and see if I could make it work. And And fortunately, it's been 4 years of doing it now. So
I really think like the best businesses, the best products, they happen organically. Like the really cool businesses have this type of story where it's not like you woke up one day and you said, I love bass fishing. I'm going to basically force feed, a fishing company to come out of this passion. And like, I'm going to try and figure out how to make something and make a living out of it. It's like, no, it all just happens on this sort of, like you said, a little divine intervention. It starts gradually and it comes from a place that's organic and not super intentional. And I love that type of story. And I love obviously where you're at now, and congratulations. And that's awesome. So if we want to get into the product side of things, I want to ask you this question. I want to start out. I know my answer. You probably know my answer, but I want to hear it from you. If someone put a metaphorical firearm to your head and you said, what is the favorite product that you currently make? Like, where do you have the soft spot for one SKU in your lineup? What is it?
It is going to have to be, I think we're going to agree on this one. It's got to be our new finesse spinnerbait. We call it the Minigun. And there's a very cool story. And I think behind that one as well, but it's super compact, super finesse. And it was something that was actually developed for my kids to fish, because we were on some phenomenal spinnerbait fishing at the time. And my kids, my twins, who are a little bit more into the fishing side, couldn't throw a full-size spinnerbait. They were struggling with it. And I told them I was going to go home and work on a small spinnerbait for them to be able to throw and have fun on spinning gear with. So I jammed everything down, made it super compact as I possibly could, started with some weird prototypes that I had cut up some of our tiny little underspins from. And ultimately it grew into taking them out. Hey, let's see if we can catch you, 4, 5, 12 inchers, to now we're getting 5s and 6s and 7s, and this thing's getting bit when our full size baits aren't. It became more of a staple for me in my boat than a full size spinnerbait. So that one kind of, because of the origin story and because of the extreme popularity of it over the past year, I would say is my favorite for sure.
That's another one of those stories, too, where it's not like you woke up one day, you saw the fishing trends, and you were like, ooh, people are downsizing things. I should try and capitalize on this and make a smaller spinnerbait. No, it came from the fact that it sounds like your kids just wanted something a little bit easier to chuck around on, their lighter spinning gear. And then, boom, it turns into this thing that I don't know, where it stacks in terms of, like, best sellers for you, but it is the bait that I have absolutely fallen in love with from Battle Baits over the past year or so. Shout out to my buddy Dave. I think you know Dave as well. Dave actually gave me one of these miniguns at, I think it was the Columbus Fishing Expo last year. He just walks up to me, hands me one, and says, dude, just try this. I was like, all right. So I look at the package. It's a micro spinnerbait. That's right up my alley. I live in Southern Ohio. Everything's downsized. Everything's finesse. Like, that's us to the bone. So I was like, I will 100% throw this. And the first thing that jumped right out at me when I was looking at this was that it didn't seem like you sacrificed the quality of the build to shrink the profile. Because a lot of times that's what happens, unfortunately. A lot of times somebody wants to make something smaller, and it's just by nature going to be less durable. It's not going to last as long. I mean, I can go get a Booyah Pond Magic spinnerbait or whatever and fine, but it's going to last 3 fish and it's going to be mangled to no end because, they cut corners to make them smaller and lighter and that type of stuff, where this is built heavy duty. So we're going to get into this spinnerbait quite a bit. So the first thing I guess I got to ask is, do your kids still love this bait?
I think I love it more than they do. No, they absolutely do. It's what's kind of cool about the area that we live in and their ages is they love going exploring. I mean, they would rather walk a small river or creek than spend all day out on the boat, and they'll catch frogs and crawfish and everything else. And having something that's super tiny that they can just lug on a spinning rod and go out and fish anywhere that they want, and it's incredibly weedless, and they can throw it anywhere in wood and it'll come out. And I personally love it, but they absolutely do too. So it is their number one still in their book. I just don't know how if they understand the fact that they played such a huge role in designing that. So I'll keep that secret for a while.
So what do you actually throw it on then? Like if they're trucking it out on spinning gear, like what is Flint's go-to setup for a minigun?
Well, it's weird. I mean, over the course of the last, I guess it's been 2 years since I've had it and started really the prototyping side. I typically have two of them that are rigged at almost all the time. I have one that's on a medium heavy with 15 pound that I spend a ton of time flipping docks and actually flipping type cover, almost like a jig. And then I have another that is on 8 pound line with a medium spinning setup that I can chuck and wind 1,000,000 miles into the wind. And when wind-blown banks and any other time that I'd be throwing a small underspin or a swim bait, something like that, thing just dominates. It's a very unique niche bait, but with being in southern Missouri, extremely clear water, a lot of fishing pressure. I don't know if it's necessarily the size, profile, vibration, or the fact that it's just different. It seems like, at least around here, it's a bait that a lot of fish haven't seen and are willing to take a swing at. I don't know if it's just like we had talked in the past about the smaller profile. There's a lot of small bait fish, and I think that it fits a category that there's not a lot of baits in, and for that reason, it seems like it gets bit.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, where it's like around here there are certain bodies of water that just have smaller bait. Like it's just a characteristic of that body of water. So like I can think of our river system. As you move up and down the river system, the average bait size changes. As you go to, there's a lake that's a mile from my house that has some of the biggest shad I've ever seen. And then you go 3 miles away, and there's another smaller lake that I'd say your average size is probably 3.5 inches in terms of like your normal bait fish and your shad and stuff, because it's got a better bass population that kind of keeps them intact. So yeah, it's this thing right here. And I know people aren't really gonna be able to see this because we're mostly audio, but I mean, like, it fits in the palm of your hand. This is the smallest little like compact single blade spinner bait, and it really has played a big role to the point where like I'm throwing this thing naked sometimes. I'm throwing this thing with more like a little Kitech Easy Shiner or something on the back. Do you throw a trailer on it most of the time?
And you had brought up the commando version, the screw lock version.
Yeah.
I throw that a ton. I think a lot of that kind of comes from Lake Mead fishing. Originally, we threw a lot of single tail grubs back then, but a lot of 2.8, 2.5 swim baits on ball heads. And so I have a ton of confidence in just a really small, compact swim bait. And that was, when this whole thing began, it was like, I do love a finesse swim bait on the back of it or some form of a very small plastic. But I thought, man, what if I could even condense that profile even more, make it a little bit more compact? And that's where the screw lock side of it was born, was like, man, let's take this whole finesse thing even a little bit further. And the cool part about a very compact small spinnerbait like that is that the wire frame really acts a significant part like a weed guard. So you can flip it and you can fish it in areas that you can't traditionally fish a swim bait unless you're Texas rigged or any other way. So it's a very unique bait in that sense.
Yeah, I'll actually crawl this a lot. Like I'll really slow roll crawl it on those like big rocky bottoms that we have around here. And this is probably the spinnerbait that I throw most without a trailer on it. Like I would say probably easily over half the fish I've caught on it, probably a little bit more, have been with zero trailer on it at all. No trailer hook, no nothing, just throwing it straight out of the bag and ready to go. And it's just, I don't want to add any more bulk to it than it already is sometimes. And I love the fact that it's streamlined. Your skirts are good enough. Everything's good enough that I don't feel like I need that crutch of a trailer on it if I don't want it. And it gives it a little bit different movement and vibration too, with or without, swim bait on the back. But will you indulge me a little bit? Will you let me go like piece by piece through this minigun and
Absolutely.
ask you? I'm going to get again, we're probably going to talk more in depth about a little spinnerbait than anybody, but that's what we love to do here. So I want to start with the hook and I'll work my way around. So the hook that you use in this thing, I think I've looked online. I don't know if you actually technically say what hook is in the minigun, but will you tell me if I'm full of crap or not? Can I guess what hook you've got in this? Will you tell me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Just by flat sides, it's pretty strong. I'm going to say that this is like a Mustad Ultra Point, like maybe a 2X.
It is. You nailed it. It's 2X.
This is my favorite hook to build tackle around.
It's a phenomenal spinnerbait hook. And what we kind of talked about earlier, when you're building and designing, there's some phenomenal brands out there. I use Owner, I use Gamakatsu, I use Mustad, I use BKK, and each hook really excels in certain aspects. And for whatever reason, that Mustad spinnerbait hook, as far as withstanding hook point and overall strength, is very, very hard to beat. So yes, you nailed it, and we actually 2X'd it, so it make it a little bit stronger, and you nailed it.
Yeah, when I used to, way back in the day, I used to like make my own jigs and stuff, and this was the hook that I would put in every one of my flipping jigs. I love those 2X Ultra Points. They're great. When you want to just balance sharpness and maintaining sharpness with durability, it's thick, but it doesn't require you for this just massive hook set. It penetrates fairly easy for as thick of a hook as it is.
Well, and to tell you the backstory, my kids are throwing it on medium action 6.6 spinning gear with 6-pound test, and they don't have the most powerful slackline hook set I've ever seen. They're typically reeling into fish, and they don't miss many, and they have a hard time leveraging it for whatever reason. So it absolutely penetrates awesome.
So when you were testing this, was there like a close second? Was there almost a different hook in this?
You know, on all my full size spinnerbaits, I've always ran the Mustad Ultra Points, the 2X Ultra Points. And so I put a lot of stock into the Mustad spinnerbait hooks. You were a little bit limited when, depending on the size that you have. The 1/4 ounce have a 1/0, the 3/8 have a 2/0, and the 1/2 ounce have a 3/0. So you're a little bit limited based on Gamakatsu and Owner's ability to get down to a 1/0, but the 1/0 on the 1/4 ounce specifically was really needed. And so it became a Owner versus Mustad, and the availability ultimately was what I love the Owner, but Owner has become very challenging to obtain as of recently. So there was a good amount of Mustad around. So that was one of the deciding factors, and the main one that I never ran into an issue with any of the Mustad spinnerbait hooks at all.
When you're testing something like that, like, is there stuff you do in the shop, or is it pretty much just like making a couple spinnerbaits with each of them, going out and fishing, and it's more like on the water stuff?
Well, I'll tell you, I kind of have a unique situation that's really nice, in the sense to where right here in Branson, I have 2 cousins that are guides on Table Rock. And since I have young kids and full-time build as fast as I can job, and I can take all my prototyping and pass off to them, fish them with your clients, tell me the pros and the cons. And because they're family, they have no problem telling me, this stinks, or you need to correct this.
Which is what you need. Yeah, you don't need yes men. You need people to be like, actually, dude, fix this.
100%. So that, I get out and fish as much as I possibly can, but there's very often it's me and kids walking creeks or walking banks, and I get out as much as I possibly can, but I lean so heavy on people that can tell me honest reviews on stuff. And like I said, you don't want the last thing you want is a yes man when it comes to building.
All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but first, the Tackle Talk podcast and Breaking the Mold are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium. Now, whether you're trying to power a full RV for off-the-grid camping or basic fishing electronics or trolling motors, there's only one battery that I've relied on for the past 2 years, and it's Dakota Lithium. Dakota Lithium packs award-winning power and capacity into some of the smallest and lightest lithium batteries on the planet. Whether you need a 12-volt, 24-volt, 36-volt, 48-volt, even a 72-volt, everything from 10 amp hour to 320 amp hour, Dakota Lithium has you covered. They're lighter, smaller, they charge faster, they last longer, and they have a rock-solid 11-year warranty standard. So if you want to try out your own Dakota Lithium battery and see the difference for yourself, you can head over to www.dakotalithium.com and listen up, because we have an even better brand new code for you to use from here on out as well for Dakota Lithium. That's code Tackle Talk 5FS, like free shipping. So that is all one word, Tackle Talk, the number 5, F as in free, and S as in shipping. That's going to save you 5% off your entire battery purchase and give you free shipping on that entire purchase. And free shipping makes a huge difference, because shipping on batteries is pretty expensive, but not anymore. As a Tackle Talk listener, you're going to save 5% and you're going to get free shipping, which means just the shipping alone is anywhere from like a $30 to $100 savings on top of your 5% off. So again, be sure to use code Tackle Talk 5FS. That's going to help you save even more money with Dakota Lithium moving forward. Be sure to use that code because it helps Dakota Lithium know that we sent you, it helps us here at the show, and it helps you save a ton of money. It's a win-win for everybody. So go check them out, www.dakotalithium.com, and use the new code TackleTalk5FS. So next, if we want to move up a little bit, like let's go to the skirt itself. So the skirts, I'm assuming, are probably one of your big calling cards. Like the skirt builds that you put on these things, it's not like, I think a lot of times it's like, oh yeah, we'll put one tab of green pumpkin and one tab of black on it and just mix them up, throw a band on it, and there's your skirt. And it's like with you, I'm assuming this is that fly tying background, right? Because these things are meticulous. And it's not even to the point where you're saying, okay, I've got this many strands of this color, this many strands of this color. They're in the same position every time. Like you're building these so that, and I'm assuming anyway, because everyone I've had is like this, where like your lighter colors are going to run on the bottom, your darker colors are going to run on the top, like a normal shad looks like. And because you're hand tying these things, they're not moving. So you're actually meticulously shaping this color palette basically of this skirt so that it's strategic about where on the skirt that color is, versus a lot of us are just like, if I make something, I put my tabs in, I run it through my little collar thing, and wherever they end up is where they end up. It can be black on top, black on the bottom next time, black on the side. You're doing that intentionally, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, and I think a lot of that kind of goes back into the fly tying side of it. I really try and dive pretty deep into the forage base and what the fish are feeding on. But ultimately, there is only so much availability of silicone that's out there. I mean, there's some huge manufacturers of silicone, but at the end of the day, they might only have 250 or 300 different colors. So where I kind of have the opportunity to make myself stand out or make our bait stand out a little bit is, well, if I want a gizzard shad, for example, and it's going to have greens and purples and blacks in the top, and it's going to go to a silver and a lighter purple on the base, however I want to structure the overall build of that bait, I can take 5 strands of one color, 5 strands for another color. I guess I'll use the gizzard shad since we were talking about that one. That is the gizzard shad that you're holding up. So that has 6 different colors in it. So it's, instead of taking a tab which has 22 strands on one side and 22 on the other and putting it through the tube and putting a band on it, you're limiting yourself to the tab location, how they fall within the band, or if you're wire tying, or for the people that wire tie, they're limited to 1 or 2 wraps with the wire, which doesn't necessarily allow the ability of stacking colors. So when you're tying with Kevlar, for example, you can wrap 6 and then 7 and then 4, and then you can do lateral lines, and then you can stack the base of it to where a lot of times when it's all done, people look at them and go, I had no idea that they sold these types of skirts. And the reality is there's 7 different skirts, but they're all tied together in a way to where they can represent a rainbow trout or a gizzard shad or a threadfin shad or an American shad. So I really try and take more of that approach. And I guess that's probably as a result of the fly tying side. But, it's one thing that it's probably a crutch of my business that prevents me from really going to that next level and producing tons of baits, but it keeps all of our customers coming back because the consistency side and the fact that you can create these colors that are really super lifelike. And I know that that's a real big clear water thing, but ultimately it's a huge confidence thing. And I think that that's probably the most overlooked aspect of it when you're talking about skirt patterns, because a lot of times you get is this going to get bit differently than a white pattern? And I get asked that a lot. And I don't know. But the reality is when you're holding one that looks like a gizzard shad or a rainbow trout or anything else, you're going to throw it a little more confidently. You're going to throw it more often. You're feeling like you're going to get bit. You're going to fish it probably a little slower, a little more correct, and you're not just chucking the line in mindlessly. And so you end up getting bit as a result of probably just the way that you're fishing and with that confidence it instills. So I don't have any anticipation of ever changing that aspect of it.
Well, and I don't know, I wouldn't call it a crutch, right? Because this is one of the big differences in you versus other spinnerbait makers. And if we're being honest here, there's only so many things you can do in the spinnerbait world to separate yourself. Like a spinnerbait is the sum of its parts, and any little piece you can make of those parts that's truly unique to you, that's really tough to do because, I can go online and I can buy blades and I can buy wire and I can buy, hooks and stuff like that. This is one of those things I think that truly makes you guys unique. And when you look at it out of the package, it's not lost on someone like me where you look at that. And the first time I saw that, I said, that belly is lighter. Like, that's not a coincidence. There's no way that's a coincidence. That was before I ever knew you had a fly tying background. It was just, that's intentional, right? The way that they're shaping that skirt, and it looks really, really good. And I've said a billion times on the show, people are probably tired of hearing me say it, I think contrast matters more to fish than color. And the contrast of this, as you look at it, is the same as the contrast of a gizzard shad. A gizzard shad gets darker as you go up the body, obviously, to the back, usually, if you're looking at it from a side profile. That's what they're getting with this type of skirt. So I think that's really important. And like you said, yeah, maybe it really makes a difference. Maybe it gives you a little bit more confidence. Why not do both, right? Why not make it as ultra realistic as you can and just take that part out of the equation?
Yeah. And I'm sure that is just a ingrained perfectionist or OCD side, whatever it be. But I have a hard time dialing a lot of that stuff back. I certainly don't want to scale it back just to scale up the production side. So it's I've had a ton of fun creating those patterns, and we've got some amazing ones in the works. So it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the future for them for sure.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving up this thing. Next, wire keeper on here too. So you do have a wire keeper for your soft plastics on there where, thank you. I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of spinnerbaits have nothing on there. It's a big pain in the tail. Then I've got to super glue this thing, or I run through a trillion different soft plastics or whatever. But you also have the Commando version. So the Commando version obviously has no skirt on it at all, a lot more slimmed down, but that has a screw lock keeper. How did you arrive to basically go screw lock on the Commando and wire keeper on the skirted one?
Well, I love the wire trailer keepers. Absolutely love them. And as far as the straight opposed to the screw lock, I've always felt like on the finesse swim bait side, whether it be a real small Kitech or anything else, I feel like the straight wire keeper has more of a tendency to rip out those super soft swim baits than a screw lock does. So on our swim bait heads or our underspins or anything else, I've always wanted to have the retention design of the screw lock. And that plays a huge part of having, like I said, that some of those those family members that can tell me the hard truth of, hey, you need a screw lock. Don't go any other route if you're doing it. And it would have been significantly easier to run a straight keeper system on that Commando, the skirtless side. But we just redesigned it. And I thought, since it's solely for a swim bait, there's no reason to not have it on that. Because of the collar length to the back of the hook shank on the minigun itself, since it was a shorter distance, it would have been a little bit trickier to have a screw lock. And for people's rigging, there's not a lot of people that are incredibly comfortable or functional when it comes to screw lock baits. So because of the distance being a little bit shorter, I felt like at that time it was going to be easier to have the straight pin design, essentially.
Well, and you basically hinted at right there that like a screw lock is great. I love screw locks. I wish everything in the world had a screw lock on it, but a screw lock is not for everybody. Like, to your point, right? If I have a kid I'm taking fishing and that has a screw lock on it, like, it's a headache. So this is a lot more for everybody, right? Your skirted spinnerbait is for the people that want to throw a trailer on it, the people who don't want to throw a trailer on it, for kids, for adults, for everybody. If you're throwing a Commando, chances are you're hip to a screw lock and you're hip to finesse tactics and stuff like that. So then you move on to the head. And the head design itself, you have an ultra detailed head on these things. I mean, you've got gill marks on there. You take the time to actually put like hollow eyes in these things, like holographic eyes in there. You've got definitely more than one paint color. I mean, you're not just doing a quick like or dip or something or hitting it with the spray gun for half a second. Like, I mean, you're putting work into the aesthetics of the head too. How did you end up with this head design in here?
I drew the original design on the back side of my police notebook back in, I think like, gosh, I don't know, probably 2014, just working a graveyard shift, parked somewhere. And I originally designed it for the full-size spinnerbait when we were coming out with the full-size spinnerbait. And ultimately, my mold maker hates me because I get super detailed but I wanted it to be unique. I wanted it to be something that the functionality and the weight distribution was there, but also I wanted it to look good, and I wanted it to be appealing, and I wanted it to be something that was going to be as unique as I possibly could. Like I've heard you say, and I've said before, there's only so much you can do with a little ball of lead in a certain area to make a weight for a 1/4 ounce or for a 3/8 ounce. But I really wanted to take as much time designing that head as far as the overall look that I possibly could, and still have the functionality to where it wasn't going to roll, it was going to run true, and everything else. And so I brought that to my swim jig line. I brought it to our buzzbait line. So I kind of wanted it to be something that was going to transcend throughout the entire company, so that someone could look at it, 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road and go, oh, it's Battle Baits. I know that head, I know that design. So kind of went back into the brand marketing side of keeping things consistent and identifiable.
I think a lot of times with spinnerbaits, people have a tendency to just mail in the head design, and they just go with like a bullet style head or a banana head or like any of those type of things. And you give it one dunk in the powder paint and you're done with that, and you're moving on, and you're just building the rest of the spinnerbait. Where with this, you can tell, don't take this the wrong way, it screams like Megabass quality to it, is what it looks like. Like, it strikes me as something I would see in like a JDM magazine or something, in terms of the quality and the detail that's put into just the head on a spinnerbait. So hats off to you. And you also did different weights in this. You do weights in a micro spinnerbait that are really, really hard to find. Like, I think with micro spinnerbaits, a lot of times, you're going to go, again, Booyah or someone like that, and you're going to get a 1/8 ounce or a 3/16 ounce. You kept the weights on these pretty heavy, which I love. You've got, I think, 1/4, 3/8, and half. Why was it important for you to keep heavy weights on these?
Well, I like fishing deep. The quarter was 100% for the kids, and that was designed for the kids. But as soon as I started fishing that quarter with them and making casts for them, and I immediately identified, like, man, we need bigger, heavier weights. We need to be able to control this bait better. We need to be able to get it down, like you talked about currents. One of the coolest parts, and I think I glossed over it when I was talking earlier about a super compact, low drag spinnerbait in current systems, is you're going to be able to get that bait down into strike zones, into back eddies, keep it in position a lot longer with a lot less drag. So,
yeah, anybody listening around me in Dayton, Ohio, don't listen to that last part. They'll be giving away my juice. Yeah, it is. It gets down, and it's the beautiful part about this is I can work this compact profile in places that no other compact spinnerbait that I own or that I've seen can get to. I can get it down there and efficiently work this in those big, like, deep drop-offs, after a big riffle or shoot or something, and I can get it down there quick without having to just completely dead kill it and let it spiral down there and fall to nothingness. Like, you can control this at a lot of different levels of the water column, where usually with a micro spinnerbait you're kind of limited to a little bit closer to the top.
Yeah, my background and fishing where I've always been extremely clear bodies of water and extremely deep. So I know that I'm not fishing the South and big flats. I'm fishing a lot of rocky reservoirs or a lot of areas with a lot of current. So weight plays a huge role, and getting down and being able to control baits and wind too. So I think that was definitely for me when when I saw the quarter ounce, and what the quarter ounce could do was, hey, let's keep the same profile. Let's not make it any bigger, but let's make it a whole lot heavier. And for me, it's transitioned into a flipping bait, a skipping bait, so many things. It's the evolution of what it is now and what it originally was intended for is significant.
So if we move on to the wire, I think depending on the weight size, you're looking at like 30 thou to 35 thou, I think, that you've got in these. How do you settle on a wire thickness? Like, because I mean, with a spinnerbait especially, like, you can't just go super thick because flex plays a big part in what a spinnerbait can do. So how did you decide on that 30 to 35 thou window for these?
Well, originally when I very first started on that quarter ounce for the kids, I was at a 24 gauge because I wanted it as finesse as I possibly can. And like I said, the first couple trips out, we caught a couple keeper fish that were over 15 on them, and they were in that 2-pound range, and stuff was getting beat up pretty hard. And then you start encountering some of those bigger fish, and it was like, you know what we want this bait to do is going to be a lot more than, I guess, what we're intending it to be. When we started, this isn't going to be a weekend kid, throw it, catch a big old brim or panfish or a couple small bass. Now we're catching 5s and 6s, and just because it's a little bit smaller doesn't mean that it can't be a little bit more durable. And so it took a lot of time going from 25 to 28 to 30 up to 32 to 35, and watching and videoing baits underwater, seeing if there was a difference going out with 3 guys in the boat and we're all throwing different wire gauges, seeing if there was going to be any difference in catch rate, if there was going to be any difference in durability. So it kind of progressed, and the 30 thousandths wire we settled on for the quarter and the 3/8. It felt like it was that happy medium of not having a broomstick. 30, 35, and even 32 seemed way too heavy on the smaller side, but it still retained enough durability on the 30,000 that was lost in the 25, but we still had the vibration side. So it was a lot of trial and error. And I think at some point in time you can drive yourself nuts with it. But, my first couple runs, I ran it with 28 gauge and just thinking, this is where I'm at. And I started having big fish beat it up. And I was like, all right, we need to increase the wire gauge a little bit, because now we're going to start encountering some 5, 6, 7 pound fish on these. And as we let's bump it up and see if we have vibration issues. Let's see if we have any rolling issues. Let's see if we encounter any of that stuff. Now all of a sudden we're not catching fish, whatever. And it never seemed like anything ever fell off. And we were able to maintain the durability side. So increase it as much as you can, make it as strong and as durable as you possibly can get away with. Just as a result of the fact that you are powder coating the heads, you're tying the skirts, you're spending all this time doing it. Let's make this thing as tough as we possibly can and get away still on the finesse side of it.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I'm assuming once you got above 35 and you get into the 40s and stuff, like it does change the properties of that bait once you get in the water. Like I think buzzbait, sometimes you can get away with just going thick, like go thick with a buzzbait, right? Because it's fine. Where with this, you do need that happy medium because you do need the flex of that arm to be able to come back, and all of that goes into effect. And again, it's easy to overlook. A lot of people would just say, pick a wire that seems like it looks good and throw it on all three and call it a day. And that's the difference between a lazy bait maker and someone who wants to try and make the best products possible. So hats off to you.
Well, thanks. And I think a lot of that, and I'm not going to take the compliment laying down. I think a lot of that just comes with time too, because I've made a million mistakes early on where you try and rush product, and you like you said, when you build out of a unique or a situation to where it's not rushed. It's not like, oh, we have to come up with this small spinnerbait, right? It was my kids need something small that they can throw. So we came across it really organically. So there was never any rush. There wasn't one out there that we were trying to compete against or get first through the market. So we had the opportunity to take all this time to really dial it in and get it right. And so that was not to say that I just wanted to clarify, because I've made plenty of mistakes. And early on in the business, when it's like, you want to be, I'm making football jigs, I'm making flipping jigs, I'm making finesse jigs. Well, now we have to have a swim bait head. So we're going to rush that. And instead of looking at something through the lens of, okay, well, we like this aspect, let's make it our own, and let's combine something to make a better mousetrap, and not rush it. Because I've been down that. I've been doing it long enough to where I've made those mistakes to where you got to take your time with it.
Well, and you seem to have this. This is the word we're probably going to throw out a lot in this 4-part series is tinkering, and a tinkerer. Like, you seem to be a tinkerer by nature. I think that's the one common thing that like all 4 of you have in common in this series. It's just there's something in your brain that just says, how can I change this? How can I, make this a little different? Like, you're never completely satisfied with it, and you're always just wondering what if. Like, what if I change this? What if I can improve this? And you're not just happy with good enough. And I think that's the inherent quality of someone that ends up being a great bait maker and somebody that really pushes the envelope a little bit on the tackle side, which again is tough to do.
Well, it's either a blessing or a curse.
Depends on the day.
It is a good thing, and there's a lot of times that you lay in bed and you just think of things you could do differently or things that you'd want to change, but ultimately that all of that comes. Your biggest inspiration is going out and just fishing. And it's throwing baits that maybe you don't build, and then you see the aspects of it. If you're fishing a style with someone else, and whether it be a swim bait head or a spinnerbait or anything else, and you go, man, I love throwing for example, I love throwing a trailer on it. I love throwing a swim bait. I see how much more effective it is under certain circumstances. I really wish there was a keeper on this thing. Or the keeper that's on there is this big, bulky lead thing, and every time I jam my Kitech on the top of it, it blows the nose out of it. I wish there was a better keeper system on it. And that's ultimately where you kind of have to, instead of just going out and saying, man, I got to build a spinnerbait. You experience some of those things, and it really lends into the building aspect that creates something a little bit different.
So last question I got on this, we have the last piece of this spinnerbait right here, and it is the blade. So I think a couple of them, you've got like a 3 I think it's the little Colorado blade, maybe on like 2 of them. But most of them come with this 3.5 willow blade on it. And it is almost like a ribbed willow blade on here versus your standard flat or, fluted or hammered blade. How did you land on a ribbed blade on this? Because it is pretty unique, and it's a blade that I've kind of come to like over the past year or so.
I think a couple different ways. I used to fish the salmon steelhead where there was a favorite spinner that I had that had a ribbed blade on it. It's not something that is totally outside of the scope of the bass world, but it's pretty common in the salmon steelhead side. And I loved how much flash it had. I loved the thought, in my opinion, and this is kind of weird and goes to the branding side, but I looked at it and thought, you know what? There's not a lot of guys that it would be unique to the company. It would be something that someone could see it and say, hey, that's a Battle Baits bait. And then I love the amount of flash. Does it make a difference as far as bite ratio? I don't know. But now I can't get away from it. Yeah. And it looks cool. Right. So I would love to throw out a bunch of garbage as far as vibration and sound in the water, but I liked it on the salmon steelhead side, and I thought, you know what, if I could have a way to tie that into the bass side, it would be super, super unique.
Yeah, I don't know what the lightologist or whatever it would be for this, but I would assume like you've got different angles on this thing. It does throw off obviously a different flash and probably catches a little bit more flash because you've got different angles for light to come and hit this thing versus a standard flat blade. But yeah, I've really come to like this blade, and I like what it does in the water. And so as we kind of start to wrap up with this bait, how would you describe the feel of this spinnerbait in the water for someone that's never actually thrown one before? I know how I would probably describe it, but I'd love to hear it from you in terms of like trying to describe to someone that has never picked up a minigun before the type of vibration and the type of feel you're going to get out of this or the drag or that type of thing versus a regular spinnerbait.
Well, and it's probably going to go a lot. I've had people call me and that have thrown the Colorado series and say, man, this is like my new chatterbait, because there's a lot of thump and there's a lot of vibration and there's a lot of movement associated with it. I think a lot of it is going to depend on your line weight, your rod weight, whether you're fishing it from a boat or if you're fishing it in current. As far as drag, to me, I feel like I can do so many different things with it as far as yo-yoing it in grass and hydrilla pockets. There's a really cool down action when you kill the bait. It definitely has a very unique, tight wobble to it that is very hard to describe because it's not a bladed jig. It's not something that is going to be erratic, but there's a tight vibration to it that is very unique that you can definitely tell it's working.
Yeah, it's almost, this isn't going to be a perfect description, but this is how my brain thinks of it. It's almost like a combination of the feel that you get when you're burning an underspin and the feeling you get of like almost like a muted blade bait. Like it's got that really tight, just like quick interval vibration to it that absolutely kills it around here in cold water. Around here right now, like I'm still throwing a minigun because it does. It has that inherent ability to still have that tight vibration in it, that really quick. It's not a big thump. You're not going to get a whole lot of like, I guess, traditional big spinnerbait thump out of this thing. Is you are going to get this tight, fast vibration and really consistent vibration as it goes through the water. And that's what I love about this thing. Obviously, it works every other season, but this isn't a bait that I have to put up in the wintertime. It's a bait that still excels around here in the wintertime.
Yeah, it is. And with clearer water here, I obviously lean harder towards the willow side. I like fishing baits a little bit quicker. You mentioned dragging them even. I stay more on the willow side. There is a giant following on the Colorado side. I'm building a ton of Colorados right now, just in anticipation for early spring. I know people want to slow it down a little bit, and there's a lot more confidence based around that single Colorado style in early spring. But yeah, I throw the willow a lot. And like you said, it is such a weird, unique action and vibration with your rod that it is very hard to describe and hard to put in a box.
And then, yeah, the Colorado side, I don't want to discount that either. I mean, I had one of the, I don't know what you call the color, but it's an all black little Colorado that I throw in the summer, like nighttime at ponds around here and stuff. And it's great.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to get you some of the new ones.
Yeah, again, hopefully some people listening to this are intrigued enough to go try these out, because you're really missing out if you've never tried one of these. And I guess this kind of brings us close to the end here, where as far as like spinnerbaits go, I know I mentioned it at the beginning, I really think spinnerbaits, of all of the different, bait categories and stuff, are one of the tougher ones to stick out in the bait world, just because it's a very component heavy build and most of the components are widely available to people. So you can go out there and buy the blades and buy the wire and buy the clevises and all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, the sum of its parts are what make a spinnerbait special. And with you, I mean, you've got great starting hook. That's fantastic. Extremely detailed head shape that goes into it. You've got a great paint scheme on the head. You've got ultra realistic skirts where you've got more of that, I guess, kind of like fly tying background and the placement of those things. You've got all hand tied skirts versus collars. You've got 3 heavier, weights that you're not typically finding in a bait this small. You've got that 3.5 ribbed blade on the back of this thing, all in one of the most compact profiles you're going to find on the market. So when you start to add all of those things up, you've got this list of like 10, 11 different like kind of unique things that all come into this really cool spinnerbait. And I think that's what makes a spinnerbait special. So huge tip of the hat to you for just an awesome product in general.
Wow. Thank you. It's
I love it.
I'll thank my kids later for sure.
Send them our thanks too. But if folks listening to this really want to try these out, obviously, where can folks find the minigun?
So currently everything that we make is available on battlebaits.com. Because I'm a one-man company most of the time, we sell direct only at this time. So battlebaits.com.
And that's the thing, too. We probably should have hit that. You're a one-man show over here. Like, you don't have some shop of 50 people back there helping make these baits. The order comes in, boop, hits your phone. Okay, go pack it up and ready to go and make sure that you're in the shop getting stocked up. So you get to feel good about what you're buying, too. You know that bait that you are throwing is, that's got Flint's fingerprints all over it. Like, that's the DNA of Flint is on this thing, which is great. So again, hats off to you. We appreciate it. Continue doing what you're doing, man. We're excited to see what the future holds for you. I know, wink, wink, nod, nod. I think you got some cool stuff in the works coming out, hopefully sometime soon, that people should keep their eye out. But ladies and gentlemen, that is Flint Pierce, owner of Battle Baits. Flint, thank you so much for stopping by, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was awesome.
All right, everybody. That concludes episode 1 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2, and we really appreciate Flint stopping by and taking some time to chat with us about what makes Battle Baits, and in particular, that minigun, so special. And I said it in the intro, I said it in the conversation, and I'll say it again, the minigun is a stone-cold killer. It's a very compact, downsized profile without sacrificing the quality of the build. And it's a truly, I would say, overbuilt micro spinnerbait, the likes of which I've never seen done this well before. So a huge shout out to Flint and what he's built over at Battle Baits. If you want to go try out your own miniguns or anything else on the website, like his commando version of the minigun, his regular suppressor spinnerbaits, the brush bomb jigs, or anything else that he makes, you can use code TACKLETALK10 to save 10% off your entire purchase just for listening to today's episode of Breaking the Mold. We don't make a dime off of this. It just helps you try out some cool gear and save some money at the same time. Thanks, Flint, for helping save some Tackle Talk listeners some money if they want to go check him out. So go show him some support. A great guy, truly making some awesome looking killer tackle in a space like spinnerbaits that's very hard to innovate and stand out in. So again, battlebaits.com, code TACKLETALK10 will help you out if you want to go check him out. Okay, folks, that's our show today. Get ready, because episode 2 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2 comes at you next week with a guest that's really helping bring a high-quality bait that typically has a very high price tag and offering it at a much more affordable price point for regular anglers without sacrificing quality or durability. In fact, I would make the argument he's improving it. So there's your teaser a little bit. Rack your brains, see if you can figure out who it is. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at Tackle Talk Podcast. Find us on the internet, tackletalkpodcast.com. Shoot us an email, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for episode 2 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2, right here on the Tackle Talk Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.